chronic disease. That's the major burden of disease. And that's the major burden of disease around the world. 90% of deaths in the Western world are from chronic diseases. 74% of deaths around the world are from chronic diseases. So this is, this is a major, major issue. And I think that it is very clear that this is nearly exclusively caused by eating a species inappropriate diet, a biologically inappropriate diet. We need to go back to what certainly getting rid of processed food, but even before processed food, people were still getting these different sorts of diseases at much, much lower rates. And they called them diseases of the West because only Westerners got them. Only people in post-agricultural societies got them. But then when pre-agricultural societies like the Native Americans, etc., shifted to a post-agricultural society, then they all started getting them, and at much higher rates. So I think that's very cut and dry. And then when you move back and you start eating to our biological design, the way that humans have been eating since humans have been humans, humans have been apex predators for at least 2 million years, if not longer. We have very clear evidence that humans have been thriving in the Arctic Circle during the ice ages at a time when the Great Plains in North America, were under a mile-high block of ice. And you're talking about 2,000 miles north of that. What exactly is there to eat besides animals, right? I mean, nothing's growing. Sure, not growing wheat. We only turned to agriculture about 10,000 years ago. And we know that because we only started producing things like amylase, which is an enzyme that breaks down plant starches into a constituent glucose molecules. That only hit the genome about 10,000 years ago. It's very, very recent. And then in these agricultural societies, it spread very widely, but not in the other societies that did not go to agriculture at that time. And then as populations shifted to agriculture, they started picking up this trait for production of amylase. So that's very clear to me. You go back to eating what humans were eating during an ice age in the Arctic Circle, and all of a sudden, people's health issues are going away. Their diabetes goes away. Their autoimmunity goes away. And hypertension, high blood pressure starts going away. Start putting on muscle. They lose fat. Their Alzheimer's starts to improve, or they never form it in the first place. All these sorts of things are massively improving people's health. And it's such a simple thing. And we see this cause and effect relationship when people are eating the way humans have always been eating, or even close to that, they don't get these diseases. And then they shift to a post-agricultural modern society way of eating, and they get these diseases of civilization as described in anthropology textbooks. And then you go back and eat, a traditional way, it goes away for all populations. So to me, it's probably one of the most obvious things that exists on this earth.
It is crazy to me with diet that it's seen as healthy to have all this processed food, and now there's this movement that meat is bad, and the plant-based diet and this and that, and it's fine to have a processed burger that tastes like beef, but it's nothing to do with beef. Now that is considered healthy, but to have a steak is not. And it's just like mind-boggling to me that people believe this. And if you think about, as you said, like thinking about what our ancestors must have eaten, surely that must be the best way to eat. I mean, animals don't get, unless they're our pets, animals don't get diabetes and things like that. They know what to do. People were born with the right sort of instincts, but we've messed that up over the last however many 100 years,
Well, and that's a great point too, because it's our domesticated pets that get the exact same diseases that we get. The only animals on Earth that get these diseases are humans and the animals that eat human food. Right? Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor, Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right, thanks guys. And in fact, vets now are saying that there's this massive increase in the rates of so-called human diseases, which are just the diseases of civilization, in the pet populations. And of course, that only happens when you feed them kibble and other sorts of man-made foods instead of just feeding them what they're supposed to eat. Dogs and cats are known carnivores, and we're giving them grain and plant-based kibble because it makes these companies a lot of money. We worry about processed foods, but then we don't realize that pet food, dog and cat food, is largely owned by the processed food manufacturers like Mars bars. They make dog and cat food, and they call it like, sexy names like, ooh, science diet. Ooh, science told us, put this exactly what should eat. Science tells us that dogs should eat meat. Science tells us that cats have to eat meat. So this is it's marketing. They're calling it science, like, ooh, this is the best. No, a bone with meat on it, that's the best. And that's obvious. An animal that they just caught and are eating, that is the best, obviously. You can't mimic that with grains and plants because A, they don't have the same nutrition, and B, they have a lot of toxic elements that cause harm. That's all there is to it. Wolves in the wild, when eating their natural diet, are in ketosis. They do not eat carbohydrates. Lions in the wild are in ketosis. They have tested this. And of course they would be. They're not eating carbohydrates, or getting fat and protein. So why would we think putting a dog or a cat on a heavily carbohydrate-rich diet, spiking their insulin and taking them out of ketosis, would be a good idea? Obviously, it's very unlikely to do that. There's an immutable law in biology, is that of adaptation. What a species has been adapting to and exposed to the longest is what they are best equipped to deal with. And humans have been eating meat for literally millions of years, multiple millions of years. We've been apex predators for over 2 million years. That's what all the best evidence shows. And apex predators, by definition, are carnivores. And then you look at felines and canines, and they've been carnivores for far longer than that. And we're saying, no, this plant, aka wheat or corn or soy, that is a human construction that did not exist in nature before we bred it and created it. No, that's the ideal food stuff for all of the above. That doesn't make any sense. We haven't been adapting to this at all for any length of time. 10,000 years is a blink of the eye in regards to just human existence. If we're talking about the entire existence of the human species, it's literally just a fraction of our existence. There was some sort of analogy. Someone said, if you had an entire like football field, 100-meter field, and that was all of human existence, we would have been eating meat all the way up until like the last centimeter, and that's agriculture. And now it's like 2 blades of grass, and like that's it. That's the only time we've actually been eating plants. The rest of the time we've just been eating meat. So we're heavily adapted to eating meat. We know that that's not harmful. There are no toxic elements in meat. The saturated fat does not cause heart disease. That is a pure con, because that was pushed by the mostly the sugar manufacturers and processed food companies, and potentially the tobacco companies as well, who then bought up most of these food companies in the 80s. They pushed that because they needed to protect their own investment in their processed food and garbage that they were selling, because that was very likely to be the cause of cardiovascular disease. So they needed to pick a scapegoat, and they just dumped money behind it and paid off some of the most prominent professors and researchers in the world from Harvard and elsewhere to lie and say this stuff. And one of those professors was named head of the USDA, and he was he was the one who authored and published the USDA declaration in the late 70s, saying that cholesterol causes heart disease, saturated fat increased cholesterol, stop eating both, this is going to kill you. And we still listen to this nonsense, even though it's in direct contravention of the published data and evidence. So much so that the U.S. dietary guidelines and recommendations in 2015 were actually changed, and they removed the recommendation to limit the amount of dietary saturated fat and cholesterol. Because as they said, there's absolutely no evidence that dietary cholesterol or saturated fat has any effect on your serum blood levels of cholesterol, and has absolutely no impact on the development of cardiovascular disease. So they said this is a non-issue anymore, and we shouldn't be worrying about it. They removed this as a a substance of concern in the diet, and yet people are still a decade later screaming this from the rooftops. Oh, limit your saturated fat to less than 10%. Well, if you want to go more than that, because recommendations are just it's just expert opinion. That's the lowest tier on the evidence hierarchy. Okay, well, let's go to the very top. The tippy top of that pyramid is an umbrella review. So you have high quality randomized control trials, because you can have poor quality randomized control trials, but high quality randomized control trials, and that can tell you something. And then you make a meta-analysis of those high quality randomized control trials, and that gives you even stronger evidence. But then when you amass enough meta-analyses of high quality randomized control trials, you can actually do a meta-analysis of those meta-analyses, and that's called an umbrella review. So what the Journal of the American College of Cardiology published in 2020, a meta-analyses of all the randomized control trials looking at the connection between dietary saturated fat and cardiovascular disease. And they found absolutely no relationship whatsoever between the intake of saturated fat and cardiovascular disease. But in fact, they found an inverse relationship between saturated fat intake and strokes. So people that ate more saturated fat actually had less strokes, and people who ate less saturated fat actually had more strokes. And yet we are still trying to tell people that saturated fat, you have to avoid it. This is so bad for you. This is absolutely against the available evidence at the highest level of evidence. This is not opinion. This is not conjecture. This is fact. And when you look back at the original vilification of saturated fat and cholesterol, you actually see that it was a complete con and a fraud. And we have hard evidence of that as well, published in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 2016, when they published actual internal memos from the sugar companies detailing how they paid off professors from Harvard and elsewhere to falsify data and publish fraudulent studies, and how one of those professors became head of the USDA. So that's where I got that. I got that from one of the top medical journals in the world. This is published literature. This is not conjecture. This is not an accusation. This is a matter of historical record. They made it up. They lied, and it has been substantially disproven since then, and it needs to go away and die. We'll tend to, well, it's the folk wisdom you may have been taught by your mother, parent, or something like that, that when you're looking for produce, if it has like signs of like an insect biting it or burrowing in, even if that insect is gone, you don't eat that one, that one's